Hello and welcome back to Ask a CFO. I'm Sophie Jackson, and in this series I'm shining a light on the unique paths and personal journeys of those who become Chief Financial Officer. Today's episode features Omar Choucair, Chief Financial Officer of Trintech, and I really loved speaking to Omar as he's had a very unique and very impressive trajectory. He's a knowledgeable financial leader with more than 20 years of experience and has seen really huge success in complex restructurings, scalings of businesses, and major capital market transactions. His unique career journey, I think, really typifies the payoff that can come from taking well-timed risks. So first of all, thank you so much for joining us and for being part of Ask a CFO. I wondered if you could introduce yourself to our audience, and then we're going to get into your origin story, if you like.
Sure. Well, thank you for hosting this event. So my name is Omar Choucair. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Trintech. Trintech is a global software company that sells software and products and services to the Office of the CFO. So we're based in Plano, Texas, a suburb of Dallas. And we have about 600 employees, and we service about over 3,000 enterprise and commercial customers. And we provide tremendous value to the Office of the CFO, streamlining manual processes and organizing them to maximize efficiencies and digital transformation.
Well, it's amazing that you're both CFO and also selling into the Office of the CFO. Thank you so much for that intro. So tell me a little bit about yourself and your origin story, if you like. So you can start as early as you like. Maybe tell us where you're from, where you grew up, and when you first thought, I'm good at finance, this is something that I could really do.
Sure. What's an interesting question. And so I'm a lifelong Texan, lived in Dallas for a very, very long time. And I grew up in a small town in West Texas. And I would say that I guess what initially drew me to the finance role is our family had a small clothing store, and I, for different reasons, had to start operating and running that store when I was 18 years old. So since I was 18 years old, I've been very familiar with borrowing money, paying money off, and dealing with finances. So I guess that would be the very original start of my story.
Amazing. And that is so funny because you are the third CFO I've spoken to now who started doing finance in a small family business. And then tell me what happened from there.
Yeah, so I can start with education. So I went to a very good business school in Texas, at Baylor University, and graduated with an accounting degree. And at the time, the only off-ramp for college students was to go to work for Big Four accounting firms. So I worked at KPMG, and I spent a decade at KPMG. And it was by far the most incredible experience that I could have had. And the reason why it was so incredible is that you worked all the time. You worked with incredibly smart, intelligent, aggressive people, and worked on mostly multinational public companies, mostly technology software companies. And PepsiCo was one of my larger companies. And it just gave me an incredible opportunity to learn, to manage people, to engage with CFOs and controllers, understand how global leaders and global companies operate, whether it's controls, processes, people, technology. It was a great opportunity, and I loved it, traveled all the time and worked a lot. And it's just interesting. If you look at the CPA track today, I think it's very, very different. It was one role and one way you could really look, but today, the Big Four and just the accounting world has just been pulled apart for reasons that we can talk about later, but it's a very different track today.
Yeah. Well, I just want to kind of jump in there and ask a little bit more about that, because one of the things that I find interesting is I think of the finance leaders that I know now, and they do come from an accounting background largely. I think that's really changing now. What would you say is the kind of the pillar to start that you would recommend for those starting finance now? Like, how has that shifted?
I would just say this. I've done a lot in 40 years, if you will. Mm-hmm. But what really gave me the edge was that I spent 10 years at KPMG.
Yeah.
Like the basis and the background and the experience and just understanding how people operate and understanding how companies, try to hide stuff, from the auditors. It happens daily. It happens every day across every company. And I think the experience that I had and the people that I learned from and mentors made all the difference in the world for what I do today. And at the end of the day, a CFO, and we'll talk about this, has evolved.
Yeah.
And you have to have great people around you. But the one thing you really have to understand is how the financials work. And if you don't have the grounded basis of how financials work between a balance sheet and income statement and cash flows, I think you're lost. Whether you have a CPA and you worked in accounting or you got that experience another way, it's the number one technical skill that you have to have.
Yeah, that makes sense. So some things have changed, but the building blocks remain the same. So tell me, you were there at KPMG, you're working with PepsiCo, you're doing all this exciting stuff. What happened after that? And when did you know this is the right moment for me to move away now from this past decade of my early career?
Yeah. So at that time, the partner track was 12 years. So I was like 1 or 2 years away from being a partner, and I loved it. Recently got married, and I had an opportunity to go work for a small public company. And at the time, the public company was brand new and owned radio stations, and owned radio stations in the U.S. And I think at the time had 15 radio stations. And right at that time, the FCC, which is the governing body that rules the broadcast transmissions, changed the rules. There was a new president in office, and they changed the rules to where you could own 8 radio stations in one market versus you could only own 2. So to go from 2 to 8 is a massive opportunity. And actually, funny story, my wife was working for this company, and they were looking for a VP of finance, and they only liked to hire people that they knew. And I went and interviewed, and they offered me the job after 45 minutes.
Wow.
Just 45 minutes, here's the job. And if you don't take the job, it'll be the biggest mistake you ever make in your life. So then I went back to KPMG and talked to the managing partner. And he said, if you take that job, it'll be the biggest mistake you ever make in your life. So I decided to go work for this company. And it was a pretty big risk. And I would just tell everybody, you have to take risks in your life. If you want to move ahead, risks are the only way. You're not going to get ahead just by doing the same thing over and over. So I left, and it was absolutely the best decision I ever made. So over the next 5 years, we moved from having 15 radio stations to 30 to 80 to 100 to 130, and then ultimately 150 radio stations. And our company went from like 100 million to over 2 billion in revenue. It was just rapid growth, and a tremendous amount of debt financings, equity raises, and just the number of people that we met along the way was just incredible. And so ultimately, we sold that business to a company called Clear Channel, which is still it's the largest broadcasting radio business or TV business in the world. And I think we sold it for like $20 billion. So it just vindicated taking a risk, the small company that just happened to blow up.
Amazing. And I just want to kind of come back to that point on the risk element, because I think the element of risk is often knowing when to leave. That can be either, I speak with many leaders in finance who've decided to move across the world, who make a gamble like that, or decide to leave a company and go to another one, such as you did. Sometimes those risks pay off, sometimes they don't. And I think you need to have a career that's patterned with sensible risks that aren't taken too often. So what advice would you give those who are kind of waiting to take that next opportunity and need to add a more risk into their kind of appetite, but aren't sure quite how to go about it and how to assess an opportunity?
It's a great question. And given that I've done this for a long time, I really try to meet and mentor people. And they ask me that question all the time, right? And it's a really tough trade-off because you feel comfortable and sometimes you have loyalty to the people that you're working with, but then you have this opportunity. So I would say a couple things. So one, if you feel like it's an upgrade to your career, then that is definitely a check. Like if you're going to get a promotion, you're going to get a raise, et cetera, and it's a new experience, then I would say that's a check to move, right? I would say the other item is it's not always about the money. And you can move for reasons other than money. Don't move solely because of the money. If it's a promotion, great. I would say the most important reason to move is that you feel comfortable with the people that you're going to go work with. And as a CFO, it's a 12 to 14 hour day every day. Weekends don't matter. And sometimes that just doesn't work for people. And, given all the things that's happened over the last 5 years, I think you might have fewer and fewer people that want to dedicate that kind of commitment and time. it's just something I don't know any different. That's just what I do. And I think people have to kind of reassess your family. You have little kids, and you sacrifice a lot, and it's just a question of A, is it help your career? B, it's not always about the money. C, the people, right? And the other thing I would say is don't be afraid of spreading. But if you were in the finance group, you may want to go into operations, right?
Yeah.
And operations are a great place to, hone your skills and get some different mindsets, because then you can always go back and be in the CFO role. So I would say look at all those different options. Obviously, you can never tell the future. You can never look in a crystal ball and see what's going to happen. But I think at the end of the day, if you kind of line up all the pluses and minuses, hopefully the pluses, will kind of lead you to the right decision.
Amazing. And I love that you're passionate about mentoring. And I think you make a very great point there. I think sometimes people like the idea of a role more than they might actually enjoy the reality of what that means. And so I think you make a great point there in what is expected, what kind of level of commitment you have to have. And that is really very much not for everybody. So I think going into things with eyes open is helpful there. What came next for you on your career path?
Yeah, the other thing I would say back to the previous question is really develop your relationships, and the relationships that you have in your Rolodex are critical. It's just, there can be nothing more important than getting your network ready. So once that company got sold, I was fortunate enough to work with the same two individuals that invested in a software technology company that was actually in San Francisco. And this company it was basically SaaS software before SaaS software was ever really important. And this business was a public company. It was in San Francisco. I think it had $50 or $60 million of revenue, and it was doing incredibly poorly. And essentially, we delivered TV commercials, like your 30-second, 1-minute spots from the advertising agency to TV stations all across North America. So when people are watching a 30-minute TV show, there's like 15 to 18 commercials. And our software and our platform delivered those to all the TV stations. So think of a large movie, whether it's Disney or Paramount or Fox, they would run 30 or 40 different commercials for a movie coming out like today on Friday. And we would distribute hundreds and hundreds and thousands of these commercials every night. So I was the CFO. They said, hey, Omar, we want you to be the CFO. And it was in San Francisco. So the problem was there's sacrifice. So we commuted every week for like 2 years to San Francisco. And obviously a huge commitment, but at the end of the day, you were all in and you had complete trust in the mission, the statement, the people, et cetera. And I remember, we went and immediately the entire accounting team quit because they did not want the change that was needed for that. So we had to rebuild the entire accounting team, finance team. The good news is we had really good technology, but we had horrible people. We did not have good salespeople. So we rebuilt the entire company over the next probably 1 or 2 years. And then we went on a massive M&A splurge. And we essentially consolidated the industry. We went from 60 million to 200 million, then ultimately to 400 million of revenue. And that's when that company got sold. And that took a long time. It took like 12 years. And during that time, just a tremendous amount of technology integration, people integration, M&A. It was almost the same thing that we had done the company before, but it was different because it was more technology and software. And then we ultimately moved the company from San Francisco to Dallas. It was a great experience and had a great finance team, great accounting team. It was phenomenal.
Amazing. And I've seen you're on the Forbes Finance Council, which is awesome. And I saw that you've written about the specialization of M&A for CFOs. So was that a time when you think you kind of honed your specialization as a CFO and what you're known for?
I would say that along with the previous company, because in the radio company, I think we did almost 30 to 40 acquisitions. And then in this company, it was more like maybe 12 to 15. And, there's so many critical pieces in M&A, and it's sourcing the deals, then it's negotiating the contracts and the provisions. But then the hardest part is always the integration of taking culture, taking people, taking customers, and then porting them over into the new business. The integration is critical. And sometimes you have to get third-party people to come in and help. And then you throw in the regulators and the attorneys and the accountants. So it's a specialized skill for sure.
And then how do you work on kind of that piece, but people aspect of things? Because I know another CFO I spoke to, he mentioned that when you're the CFO, you're kind of the walking representation of how well the company's doing. And so how you behave, your energy really matters. And I'm imagining in an integration process that is heightened to a degree I cannot imagine. So what are some of the things that you kind of work on in order to make sure that you're leading that culture and that you take people with you and you're good at communicating? Is it something you've had to work on, or is it something innate that you'll have a gift at?
Maybe a little of both. I would say I can give you a couple of examples. So what we always tried to do is best of breed. And we never said you wear a green uniform, we wear a yellow uniform. It was always, if there are really talented people, then we want them to stay. And if the talented people of the target are better than the talented people in our own company, then we will pick the more talented people every time. And I'll always tell everybody, it doesn't matter anything. It's all a matter, are you in, are you committed, and are you good at your job? And if you check all three boxes, you have a job for as long as you want. The problem is a lot of times when you buy these companies, these people make a lot of money. And once you have a different bank account, sometimes it's just human nature. They don't care. It doesn't matter if it was me or my brother, my sister, it wouldn't matter because they just, they have culture and they don't want to go forward. And so my view has always been just get it up front or even before. Like, we'd love for you to stay. If you don't want to stay, then let's just talk about you leaving on a very orderly basis. That doesn't always work because then there are people that won't tell you. They just want to stay, and then they don't really perform. And then you just have to go to them and say, look, this isn't working. So I've done it countless times in my life. And I always tell people, look, be honest, be fair, and just say, look, this just isn't going to work out. I don't want you to be mad at me. I may see you on the street 5 years from now, and there's no need for anybody to be upset. It's just time to part ways. And I think people appreciate people being honest with them as opposed to not. That's what I've learned. Just you have to be honest with people, and if they don't want to work there, then and we even say that today at Trintech. If this is not a job that you really enjoy doing and coming into the office, then this may not be the place that you need to be, and for whatever reason. And we say life is too short.
Yeah, and I think when I meet founders who've scaled successfully, that's because they've been able to really cherry pick those high performers who are so committed to the mission, and to have that behind you makes you unstoppable.
Yeah. So the other thing I would say is during the second company, the DG company, we made a bet the farm bet or bet the ranch on one acquisition. And basically we were delivering TV commercials and radio commercials. And at the time, the internet was just coming up, and most young people today, they have no idea that there used to be a world before the internet, right? So there wasn't Google. But right at the time, we saw a lot of the advertisers shifting budget spend from TV to the internet. And we knew that we were going to get displaced if we didn't do something. So if you remember, there was a company called DoubleClick, and DoubleClick, and now it's owned by Google, was the very first ad server. So this is the technology that distributed the Coca-Cola ads to your computer, and you had to watch the ads before you could pull any content down. So there was a number two company, and it was called MediaMind, and it was based in Tel Aviv. And they had just gone public, and I think they stumbled, right out of the first or second quarter. And we decided that's the company we should buy. And at the time, it was a massive investment. It was like $600 million. But in today's world, it would have been well over $1 billion. And we weren't that large of a company. So we had to go convince two of the top banks in the world to lend us the money. And we did it. And we closed the deal. And then we immediately inherited over 200 employees in Tel Aviv. And so that was a completely different integration for us, because it was obviously we wanted to keep as many people as we could. And I remember traveling Tel Aviv 2 or 3 times, and the people could not have been nicer. They great work ethic, et cetera. But the problem was they all made a lot of money. And then that's the challenge of maintaining and retaining people when their economic world changed, right? And so that was just a different issue, but definitely the culture and the people, and it was a great opportunity. And that's really when we went from being more of a U.S. based company to a global company, and with that came a myriad of additional challenges with taxes, transfer pricing, just all the things that like we deal with, today at Trintech is, global entities and different tax structures and all the statutory filings was a completely different world for us. And we obviously had to hire a lot more people to do that.
Wow, amazing. It sounds like quite the journey. So tell me, what brought you to Trintech and what appealed to you about the role? What makes you excited about the space you're in now?
Yeah, so just real quickly, after that company got sold to private equity, I went to that was two public companies. Then I went to work for a privately held company owned by a PE firm called Warburg Pincus. And that was a software company. I did that for like 5 or 6 years. And then that company got traded to a strategic. And then I was looking around and I heard about this company called Trintech, and just coincidence, it happened to be based in Dallas. And I had never heard of this company. And I met the CEO, Teresa was the CEO at the time, and she told me what they were looking for. And I think at the time the company was in the need for a CFO, and they were looking for a different change, et cetera. And the allure of working for a software company that sold software to the office of the CFO was intriguing, for sure. And there were challenges, and with any software company, it's a very technical space. And if you've been in the software world, software eats the world. And looking back over the last 5 years, the CFOs are more and more dependent on technology today than they ever have been, because it's so difficult to hire people, competent people, hire accounting folks, and just the pressure and the role has evolved beyond so much of what it was 4 or 5, 6 years ago. So anyway, I met Teresa and then got a chance to meet a few of the people and said, this seems like a really good culture and fit. And, since then we've doubled the size of the business, or double and a half the size of the business. So it's a great company, great people. And we're actually helping CFOs. Our company mantra is give back time. And we're trying to give back time to CFOs and chief accounting officers.
Amazing. So maybe we can talk a little bit more about that and about how the roles evolved. So tell me, how do you see the advent of technology affecting what the role of CFO actually is, and what areas are you left now more to shape and more to develop than you were, say, even a decade ago?
So first, we can talk about just the role of the CFO. And I think during COVID or immediately after COVID, the CFO role and view and the direction changed immensely, because when everything went south, March of 2020, and I was only in the role for maybe 4, 5, 6 months. You can imagine just the chaos that occurred with everybody going home, and immediately everybody started wondering what's going to happen to our business, what happens with our credit agreement, what happens with the revolver. Are all of our customers shut down? And obviously they couldn't, because they're running massively large public companies, and it seemed like everything says, well, hey, Omar, what are we going to do here? Like, what is happening? People just couldn't get their head around that everything had shut down immediately. And I think that really was the beginning of, wow, people were looking to, the CFO to deal with the operational views, with where the money is, where the money's going to go, all the HR. The HR alone was just a massive work. Dealing with shareholders, if you're a public company, dealing with your board of directors, nobody had a playbook. We had stories of customers they didn't have laptops. They were actually physically taking their tower computers and putting them in the back seat of their car so they could work at home. I mean, it was complete chaos. Luckily, what we do enables people to streamline their monthly processes, et cetera. So you don't have to have a lot of paper. You can have a laptop and you can continue to do your work, whether it's billings, receivables, payables, all your budgeting, et cetera. You can do all that, remotely. And I think we really helped a lot of people during that time. But at the same time, I think just individual ELT, whether you're the CRO, the CMO, the chief technology officer, the CEO, it seemed like everybody kind of said, wow, what are we supposed to do? And they kind of all said, okay, well, hey, I think the CFO needs to tie all this together. So it was chaos for probably a year inside every single company. And on our side, I mean, it was a 24/7 program, and we had daily stand-up meetings. We started preparing analysis and schedules that you never would have done in the past. And I think that was kind of the beginning of okay, the CFO's role like significantly expanded. And then not to mention InfoSec. So today I've got all the FP&A, the accounting, the InfoSec, IT, legal, and HR. And so that's a little broader than what maybe most CFO roles would be, but just given the ELT that we have, it just kind of made sense in our company. As we get bigger, if we got 600 employees, I mean, the bigger you get, maybe that doesn't make all the sense in the world. But given that the InfoSec, the risk associated with what was happening with all these employees across the world working from home, created a really larger risk on the InfoSec side. So it's just, there's dozens of things that happened that were all high priority during that time. And I think that's what really kicked off the broader role for the CFO.
And so then, do you think that has changed the last 4 years, the advice that you would offer those starting out their careers in finance?
I don't know if there's anything different, but I think the one thing I tell our people is that you really have to understand the business. And you have to question and ask a lot of questions of sales, of R&D, of marketing, of product. And I think that's what, as an FP&A team and a business intelligence team, the more you know about the business, the better decisions you can make. And then also the relationship that you build with the CMO and the CTO and the product team. Because once you develop the relationship, they will tell you everything that you need to know.
Yeah.
It's just, they have to have trust, right? And if you don't have trust and you don't have a relationship, it's going to be hard for you to get the information that you need. It kind of goes back to when I was at KPMG, because you wind up spending 80% of your time, asking questions and developing relationships. And the only way you can get the real answer is if they trust you. So I would just say that for people now just coming into the role, the more you know about the business, whatever business you're in, if you're in the oil and gas business or the pharmaceutical business or retail or whatever it is, the more you know about the business, the better off that you'll be and the more successful you'll be at your job.
Yeah. And you mentioned early on that the kind of the power of your network. And so I wanted to kind of link a few elements that you've mentioned there. The first one was this idea of your network. The second one was your kind of passion for mentoring. So tell me, who has been someone that mentored you either earlier on or later on that really stands out? You don't have to say their name. You could just describe them. And what was it that you think made it special about that relationship?
Well, I think just for me in the past, there were several people at KPMG that, that even to this day, 40 years later, that we still stay in touch with. And I think that it's like tough love, right? I mean, they say, hey, you need to do this a different way. And I think from my view, I have like zero ego. So if I need to do something different, then let's change it. And so I got a lot of feedback from them, but I would say more than anything was by the CEO at the radio company and then the technology company, because he was incredibly difficult, but the smartest person you've ever met. And he would call me at midnight. He'd call me at 10 at night, call me day at night. Didn't do so well for my family, but I think it was important because he depended on me. And unfortunately, he passed away earlier this year, but I think he basically told me, this is how you do things the right way. And he told me, you're not in a popularity contest. You're trying to protect the company. And I'll always remember that, hey, you're not here for everybody to like you. You're here because we want people to respect you. And you're not always going to make decisions that are popular by everybody. But the main thing is protect the company. So I always learn from that. And then I would just say that on the flip side, I've always tried to get people, and I've had numerous VP of FP&As and controllers, and I've seen them go off and have great jobs. And they become CFOs, they become VP treasury. And I love that. And if I had been a little part of them moving on and being successful, then I just think that's great. Then I would say the other thing is I have two daughters that started in the workforce maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And many times these kids, the younger kids and their friends, just have coffee with them. It's like the most important thing you have to do is you have to build your network, right? And all the people that you've met, you have to hit them on LinkedIn and you have to go have coffee. And even if you call 10 people and only 5 people want to go have breakfast with you or whatever, that's 5 people that you didn't have. Because the key is you're going to need people in your network, but you can't go to them when it's too late. Like if you, for whatever reason, you need another job or you're looking for somebody else, you can't just call up somebody that you haven't talked to in 5 years. You have to call them up because you just saw them like a month ago or 2 months ago.
I think that is such great advice. And I would also add to that as well, being quite intentional with people as well. Because I think sometimes the younger generation are quite good at reaching out, but not quite so good at knowing what they're reaching out for. And so I think being quite intentional, like you admire this person for this reason, you want to talk to them about this thing they're really good at. Because I think people are much more willing to help you than we think, especially if you can tell them what it is about them and about their experience that you've identified as being valuable.
I couldn't agree more. And the key is that you just need to be strategic about who you're approaching. Like for me, whether it's attorneys, accountants, real estate brokers, other peers in the business. I mean, think about you having 10 core, 20 core people. Each one of those core people have 20 or 30 or 40 people that's core to them. And it's great for personal reasons. It's great for business. As I talk to people, it's, oh, well, I just had a CFO. He just switched jobs. He's not happy with the financial systems that he's got at his new company. Oh, well, I'm going to have him call you, right? I mean, I've even toyed with the idea of writing a book about it, and I've already started. It's just I don't have time to finish it, but there's so much that people can benefit from just reaching out to people, and it's never too late. Even if you're in your 40s or 50s, it's not too late. But when you need somebody, it's too late if you haven't reached out to them, because people are not going to really call you back if you haven't talked to them in 5 years. And trust me, you will always need help.
Yeah. And I think your energy from being in startups really shows. Like, I think you've got like such a kind of a founder spirit about the way you approach things. And I wish everyone had, because now that we're in a job market that's constricting, as you well said, there are people who I've said never used LinkedIn, never reached out, and they've not been active. And now suddenly they need it. But you can't mobilize a network that's inactive, just as you're saying. So keeping these things active, doing favors for people all the time, being useful, becoming invaluable. Then when you need it, people are so there behind you, and you often get tapped on the shoulder as well. You don't need to go out hunting, right?
100%. The other thing is that accountants need it more than anybody, because if you're in sales, if you're in marketing, then you may have more of an outgoing personality. But if you're a developer, if you're in operations, if you're a data analyst, if you're an accountant, more than likely, they're not going to be those very gregarious personalities, and they may need it more than others.
Amazing. Is there anything else you'd like to share about how you've seen the role evolve, or advice on kind of new skill sets that people should be thinking of?
Sure. A couple of things. So not so much given what I do every day, but you have to be technology savvy. And I've always said there's two types of CFOs and controllers out there. Those that have accepted the fact that the world changed and technology is taken over, and those that are still going to do things the old-fashioned way. And the old-fashioned way, if it's not gone, it will be gone when they leave that role, right? So I would say that technology is it's just so critical. And it's critical for so many reasons. One, it's really hard to get talented people. And when you get talented people and they come in your organization and you're living in the 1980s and you don't have good systems, they probably won't come work for you. So you have to invest in new technology. And then it'd be hard not to even talk about AI. And somebody told me the other day that AI is like having the absolute best intern you've ever seen, you've ever had. And that intern having the complete knowledge of the internet. So if you combine those two, that's essentially AI. And it's a game changer. And I know everybody talks about it, but there's a reason why there are hundreds of billions of dollars that are being invested in competing platforms with AI. There's a reason. It can transform a lot of work. So spend a lot of time on your digital savvy capabilities.
Amazing. And then any final words of advice to wrap up our conversation, or calls to action for the community of Ask a CFO listeners?
First of all, thank you for this. This is great to chat with folks that are passionate about the Office of the CFO and Treasury. And look, at the end of the day, we're no longer the bean counters, right? So
yes,
the whole CFO team has been elevated to a pretty high role, like second lieutenant to the CEO. I have a great relationship with the CEO today, and they really depend on you to make good decisions. You don't have to make the right decision every day, but be honest and be truthful and work as hard as you can. That's what I would say.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I loved hearing your story and I love learning a little bit more about Trintech's work, and I look forward to seeing where things go next. Thank you so much to Omar for taking part in our Ask a CFO series. Stay tuned and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from, as we'll be regularly releasing further episodes with an array of different CFOs located across the world. Thank you so much, and please do join us again.